Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Before we start today's 10 o'clock dialogue session, couple of announcements. One important announcement is that the Besant lecture that is due to be given by the Honorable Governor of Tamil Nadu has been shifted for today. In the program booklets, you may be having it on 3rd of January, but due to some unavoidable reasons, it is shifted for today evening, 5 o'clock, same time. And today's lecture, the Theosophy Science lecture, has been shifted for tomorrow, same time, 5 o'clock. So please, you can update your program booklets because that change happened after the booklets were printed. And one more announcement that after this dialogue session, as you can see in your program booklet, there is a discussion group session, which is an informal discussion among the delegates, so they also can participate, but of course with the help of some facilitators. So we'll be having 4 groups, and I request the group leaders to come here in front so all of you can see them, so that after the dialogue session, you can join any of those groups. So number 1 group is led by Clover. Please come here in front. Aditya, Smita, please all come. Suvralina, please come. So Clover is the leader for the group 1. Aditya will be the leader for group 2. Smita Pragyan for the group 3. And Suvralina Mohanty for group 4. So after the dialogue session, you can make 4 groups, you can turn around the chairs, and basically it will be a discussion on the theme of the convention led by these young theosophists. And at the end of the session, whatever has been the discussion can be expressed by the team leaders in a couple of minutes with all of the delegates present. So I thank the volunteer team leaders also. Thank you. And after this session, you can take charge. And one more announcement that at 1:30 p.m. today, there is the general body meeting of Bharat Samaj Association in the Bharat Samaj Temple. So please, those who are the Bharat Samaj members, please are welcome to join. And if anybody wants to join the Bharat Samaj, is also welcome. And I request now Brother Gerard Brennan to make a couple of announcements regarding the Indo-Pacific conference.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Gerard Brennan, as you just heard, and I'm the president currently of the Indo-Pacific Federation, which of course involves many of the countries in the Asia-Pacific region, all the way from India, the TS sections, down to Australia and New Zealand. I just wanted to let you know that the next Indo-Pacific Convention is proposed to take place in 2026 because we have the World Congress coming up. This year, we thought it'd be best to have it a year later than we normally would. So this conference is normally held every 3 years within various sections of the TS in the Indo-Pacific region. So this time, it's the turn of Australia to host this particular conference. So it will be held in Perth in Western Australia. So it's a little bit closer to India and some countries and sections in the Asia-Pacific region. So you are all very cordially invited to attend this conference. More information will be supplied later online, but we certainly extend a very warm invitation to theosophists across the Indo-Pacific region and indeed around the world to attend our next Indo-Pacific conference in Perth in late October, November of 2026. So hopefully we'll see many of you, or as many of you there as possible. Thank you.
I request our international president, Mr. Tim Boyd, and Brother Pedro Oliveira to take their place on stage for the dialogue session. I request Catalina Saza Cantor to please come on stage and introduce our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. I request you please to stand up so we repeat together the invocation. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May all who feel themselves as one with thee know they are therefore one with every other. Please sit. Well, it is a real pleasure and honor for me to welcome everyone to this dialogue and introduce Tim and Pedro. They will be talking on theosophy, the Theosophical Society, and the world. Both of them are remarkable individuals who exemplify a deep commitment to theosophy and its transformative potential. Their journeys within the Theosophical Society reflect lives dedicated to service, leadership, and the embodiment of the society's ideals, inspiring countless individuals worldwide. If I were to encapsulate their biodata in one phrase, I'd say their theosophical journeys are those of the life of visionary leadership, spiritual service, and devoted voice for the ageless wisdom. Mr. Tim Boyd was born in New York City. He studied at Brown University and graduated with honors in public affairs from the University of Chicago. A member of the Theosophical Society in America since 1974, he co-founded a spiritual community in Chicago's inner city, focusing on the ageless wisdom, meditation, and healing. His leadership includes serving as a president of the Theosophical Order of Service in the US, spearheading projects like the Chushul Orphanage in Tibet and organizing the Dalai Lama's 2000 visit to Chicago that was attended by 10,000 people. He also was elected president of the TS in America in 2011. As we also know, he has served as international president of the Theosophical Society since 2014, following re-election in 2021. Dean's vision and work as international president emphasizes unity, wisdom, and global community building. His initiatives align with his commitment to making theosophy accessible worldwide, supported by his wife, Lily, whose Tamil heritage plays a vital role in addressing the needs of the Adyar campus. Mr. Pedro Oliveira joined the Theosophical Society in 1978, and he has served in various roles, including education coordinator for the Theosophical Society in Australia, where he is a member, president of the Indo-Pacific Federation, international secretary at Adyar, and editorial officer at the international headquarters as well. A prolific lecturer, he has spoken worldwide on perennial wisdom, spirituality, mysticism, and comparative religion. He is also a prolific writer. He is the author of N. Sri Ram, A Life of Benefice and Wisdom, CWL Speaks, Leadbeater's Correspondence Concerning the 1906 Crisis in the Theosophical Society, and Annie Besant in India, recently published in 2021. His articles have appeared in a number of Society's international journals. So I'm leaving you in a very good company, and I thank both of you for sharing with us today, and I wish you and all of us a wonderful session and a rest of great convention. Namaste.
While they are setting up the microphone, excuse me, for Pedro, just a reminder for those of, does everybody hear me? It's not, so, any better? All right, so the sound is a little bit low, and, how's it? Okay, you'll set up. All right, better? All right. So you heard, all of you weren't in your seats at the time that Shikar made his announcement about the governor speaking this afternoon. Just wanted to be sure, because when we initially printed the printed version of the program which you had, he was scheduled to speak tomorrow. That changed. He was speaking here today. The online version is correct. But the idea is this: by 4:30, you'll need to be in your seats, because, you know, all of the kind of security things that go around come with being a governor. So 4:30 today, you better be in your seats. Otherwise, I don't know if you'll be able to be seated. Tell your friends, anyone who is not here, that that's going to be their arrangement. And with that, Pedro and I, with a little bit of luck, will forget that you're there. I've been looking forward to having an opportunity to share with you, Pedro.
Thank you.
As you know, for many years have been, it's only in fairly recent years that I became involved internationally. You have been on that international stage for quite a while. And so, you've had an opportunity to see a lot, and I hope during the time that we're talking together, perhaps some of these things we'll get a chance to go into.
Yes.
We're going to talk about Theosophy, Theosophical Society, the world. I also would like to talk about this idea that we were going to initially address about Theosophy as transformation. Now, that was a thought that you had. Can you tell me a little bit about where we might have been going had that been the topic?
Yes. To put it simply, I am temporarily convinced, because convictions change with time. I'm temporarily convinced that, for example, if you really obtain an insight into the law of karma, it's bound to change you. Just imagine a group of people who, because they understand what the law of karma is, they stop grudging about things. They stop blaming others. And I say this because I was a student of Annie Besant's book, The Laws of the Higher Life, and she brings in the subject of prarabdha karma, which I would like to say that, from what I understood, that's the part of your karma that is downloaded in this life.
Right.
There may be some sort of arrangement, is more things are downloaded than you expected. But coming back to the law of karma, this is only one aspect of the theosophical teaching. If you really understand this law, which the Buddhists, they also use the word karma, but the overarching concept is dharma. I'm sure you are very well familiar with this. Anyone who understands this at a deep level, that has a transformative effect, because just imagine going through life without blaming others or blaming situations, you know. So this is only one aspect.
Okay. So that's really along the line of the purpose of the Theosophical Society, which is to make it known that this transformative power that is Theosophy actually exists. Oh, little adjustment there.
Yes. I have a strange relationship with microphones, as you know.
I don't know. What is it?
Anyhow, that's all part of karma.
But the idea that making it known that this thing that we call Theosophy exists is a purpose, is something that has always been not just fascinating, but it's been something that tried to work out in my own thought, in my own life, how it is that that works. Obviously, it does in fact seem that just the awareness of the profound possibilities that you find within Theosophy, it changes something. I mean, I have seen, when I first became associated, first became aware that such a thing as Theosophy exists, it was the person who had made me aware was operating in a setting of people who you would think Theosophy was the furthest thing from their life, their mind, their experience, certainly. But somehow or another, it was something that, when encountered, many of these people had profound changes in their life. And a lot of it was really based on this teaching of karma. You know, the idea that once you embrace something like that, if it doesn't change you, then it's because you have not embraced it. But I have seen it in Chicago. This gentleman was operating with, they used to have a lot of gangs there, and a lot of these people were very active in doing things you would say are wrong, became associated with him. And you saw changes, just dramatic changes, just from this idea that, first of all, it wasn't just what is done comes back to you. It was also the fact that what is done benefits others. And that was a thought that had escaped many. So the power that is just from making it known. Yeah.
For example, Connor Alcott was the fact that he created so many lodges, the fact that he created so many lodges in India and other countries is because he was a very well-organized man. So he would book a hall, he would create a publicity for that, and he would bring application forms. And because he was Colonel Olcott, people would throng his talks, and he would make many members, and from that, lodges. So he was transforming lives just there and then. But there was one occasion, he said in Old Diary Leaves, that he reached the hall. He had already booked the hall. He had made the publicity. There was only one person there, and that person was an electrician who had been called there to fix a lamp. He gave his full talk to this man.
Yeah,
So I think that's the spirit, isn't it?
it is. I've had to do that myself over time.
I will not suggest that you are the reincarnation of Colonel Olcott.
No, please don't. No, he was a practical man. I consider myself practical, but he was remarkable in his practicality.
Yes. And another thing that it was part of his life, this, as you know, I'm interested in theosophical history, you know. And there were the society has had a number of complications over the years. I think this is also associated with karma. My theory, I hope I don't shock you here,
Please shock me.
that every time the society has a new president, there is some sort of karmic rearrangement associated with that person in a way. And it happened to Colonel Olcott. Some people didn't like him. And sometimes he had a difficult relationship with Madame Blavatsky, but they stuck together until the very end. And there was some opposition to him, and then he decided to resign. Just imagine Colonel Olcott deciding to resign. So he wrote the resignation letter and sent it to the secretary of the executive committee, instructing him to table that resignation at the next meeting. After he did that, he said, I'm not saying he said, he received a clairaudient message from his guru saying, you will stay in that office until I tell you to step down. He withdrew the resignation. So he was also very devoted to his teachers, you know. And, but to promote the society was the passion of his heart.
Yeah. I think that probably caused some problems between him and HPB as well.
Yes.
The fact that she could be, being HPB, she would express herself in ways that were not politic. And it did cause him a lot of problems, I know.
Yes.
And her as well.
Yes, they say she was a kind of a mercurial person. There is a testimony from C.W. Leadbeater. He had been traveling with her from Alexandria to Colombo in 1884 or 85. And when they reached Colombo, they didn't have gangways in those days, you know, between the ship and the docks. They used planks.
Yeah.
So the captain said, everybody has to walk through the plank except Madame Blavatsky because of her weight. Now, you don't say that to HPB lightly. So what did they do? They put her on a crate, and he winds her out of the ship. And Mr. Leadbeater said that the atmosphere became blue because she was swearing every possible swear words. She was very different.
Yeah, I know a lot of people, you know, in our Theosophical Society who just wish that they could have been there to be around her. And I don't think they know what they were wishing for. Really, because when you hear the reports of people who, her withering comments about, she held nothing back, and poor Olcott caught more of it perhaps than anyone.
Yes. Anyhow, he also said that sometimes she could wound his feelings, and then he had to work it out within himself how to deal with that. And then, of course, he, because of the higher purpose of the society, they had to make amends, you know.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Theosophy. You've been associated with it, I have. Could you, for the benefit of everyone here, just tell very clearly what it is? You'll be the first one to have done that.
Yes. I am going to make a reference to one of your mentors in the TS. I hope I'm not wrong.
Probably not.
Did you ever meet Joy Mills?
I definitely met
Yeah,
Joy
yes,
Mills.
yes.
A good friend.
I was her student in 1983, and she didn't suffer fools gladly, you know. She could speak her mind. But at the end of a class, someone asked her, Joy, what is theosophy? Now, I have a theory, Tim, that whenever you ask a question to a wise person, you don't know what you are getting.
Yeah.
Because a wise person functions in a parameter that is higher than ours, you know. Certainly mine. I'm not including you here.
Include me, please.
So she took a pen, went to the whiteboard at Crotona classroom, and said, the word theosophy comes from the Greek theosophia, which means divine wisdom. But Madame Blavatsky said that there is a Sanskrit equivalent, meaning Brahmavidya. Now, it's a long story, it's an etymological study, I'm just summing up. She basically said, analyzing the verbal root of theos and the verbal root of Brahman and Vidya, she said, theosophy is a way of seeing that's constantly growing. And then she said, and her eyes lit up, she said, and that's wisdom. So I adhere to that.
So you would take that as your own.
Yes, I think it works for me.
Okay. I know HPB tried several times to describe it, and others have. But I think the idea that comes across is that it cannot be encompassed, but that if you make a start, you find your way to ever deepening reaches of what this theosophy is. Over the time that the Theosophical Society has existed, you can say that it has produced a number of really great people, and you dwell a great deal in terms of the history. I mean, some of your books are some of the best books on the histories related to this movement. Among those people, of course, was a seminal figure post-Blavatsky was, of course, J. Krishnamurti, who is highly revered by many, but his presence, his coming into being within an organization was something that was a cause of great benefits and also great controversy. What do you think in terms of the rise of Krishnamurti and the fact that it was something that was in many ways shattering to an organization? But what would be your thoughts about that?
Can I have some water?
Sure. Do we need another bottle?
No. And I want to reaffirm that this is just water.
We'll judge it by what you say next.
Yes. Well, if you go to the Adyar beach by the river path, crossing the gate, you have the vastness of the sea. C.W. Leadbeater was living in the octagonal bungalow near the headquarters building.
Oh, that's right.
He was very methodical, so every 5 o'clock, he and Ernest Wood and others would walk to the beach. He would go for a swim and come back. There were some kids playing on the beach. Mm-hmm. On the way back, he told Ernest Wood, there was a boy on the beach with the most extraordinary aura I have ever seen. And then Ernest Wood said, that's Krishnamurti. And then in a separate article, he was surprised because he had been his tutor and Krishnamurti was a bit slow at that time.
Yeah.
And then Leadbeater dropped the few spiritual nuclear weapon. He said, this boy will be a great orator and a great teacher. Ernest Wood couldn't believe it. He said, how great? Remember my theory of asking someone who has some wisdom. That Peter said, Ernest Wood said, how great? Peter said, Wood said, great like Annie Besant, who was considered one of the best orators of her time.
Sure.
So Peter said, much greater. That takes quite courage because he was very devoted to her. So this boy was prepared, and Besant and Leadbeater had a very profound role in that preparation. Eventually he became a young man thinking for himself. And then eventually, I have to shorten my narrative, eventually they wanted him, because he was considered to be the vehicle of the world teacher, they asked him to accept apostles. Now, apostles is an old paradigm, you know. I mean, with further ado, Jesus chose those who are committed. Although a modern commentator said, where on earth Jesus find in the Middle East men like Matthew, Paul, and so on. Anyhow, he found them. And of course, Krishnamurti didn't accept that. He didn't want to be part of that paradigm. Much later, and I will say just a few comments later, much later, Krishnamurti was talking to friends in Brockwood Park as an elderly man, and he said, of all the theosophists at that time, the one who was close to complete transformation was Annie Besant. And of course, eventually somebody has to ask that question to a wise person. And this person said, why? And Krishnamurti said, because you don't know how great her capacity for love was. So for him, there is no transformation without love. Now, he left in 1929. The archives have the membership application with the annotation of his resignation, together with Nityananda in 1931. And he went in his own way. I talked to someone who was a bishop of the church in Australia, and I said, why was this fuss about? He just left. He said, well, for those people who left, they left not only in the TS, but the church. They say, if Besant and Leadbeater had got that wrong, they got everything wrong. So that was their stance. And personally, you ask my view, I can only say that because I have drank water. And that is, his resignation was a difficult test for the TS. But it shook the tree. The TS needed to gain its own identity. The TS, you as president know this much better than us, you know. The TS cannot have an official teacher because that means the end of that spirit of inquiry. That's all.
Well, I think he did not want to play the role of anybody's teacher or guru. It would have made his mission pointless because it's all about you waking up.
Yes.
He would say, though, that he never left the TS. The TS left him.
Yes, but I think that applies more to the inner side of things. Do you know why? Because when he came here at the invitation of Radha Bernier in October 1980, there are a lot of people at the gate, you know. He walked from there to her house. She said she offered him some orange juice, but she never expected so many people. So he got the real orange juice. The other got diluted orange juice. And then he and she drove in the foundation's, Krishnamurti Foundation's car to the gate, and he said to her, "What are you going to do now?" She said, "I'll walk back." He said, "I'll take you back." So the car turned. When the car was starting from the main gate, he looked at her and said, "Radhaji, do you believe in the masters?" Mm-hmm. You know my theory about questions like that. Mm-hmm. She said, "Yes." And then he said, "What do you mean by yes? Do you know that Annie Besant's life was completely different because of it?" So they were silent for a while. Then he asked the same question, "So Radhaji, do you believe in the masters?" She said, "Yes, Krishnaji, I do." And he said, "Good." Mm-hmm. So, and also he said later in life, he said, "I know when I'm going to die, but I'm not supposed to tell anybody. They know." Mm-hmm. So I feel, and I have read some texts by Sri Ram as well and by Jnanarajadasa, that although he was formally out of the TS, that is, this link was still there.
Mm. And I think he made it clear that although he didn't talk about the masters, he didn't go into healing, although he was a great healer. He was always trying to do something. I remember Radha telling at one point how she had some particular condition when she was in Switzerland. And she ran into Krishnamurti there. He had always had a liking for her, and so he invited her for lunch, and then he worked on her, magnetically to try and relieve the condition. But he kept working. He said, "No, this one isn't going to work on this." But other people have had remarkable healings that he would do.
Yes.
But don't speak about it.
Yes,
would be his request.
Yes. There is an amusing story. You must have heard of Rohit Mehta, of course. Mm-hmm. He lived in Benares at that time. He was part of Gandhiji's independence movement, and at that time, the price to be part of that movement is to be beaten up by British guards.
Sure.
Anyhow, so they hit his right hand, and as a result of that, his hand became paralyzed. The right hand became paralyzed. So he went to Krishnaji and he said, "Sir, I know that you don't want to be known as a healer, but this is my situation. Mm-hmm. Can you help me?" He said, "I don't want to be known as a healer, but I'll try to help you." So he imposed his hand and so on, and went away to another country. And Rohit Mehta told us at the School of the Wisdom in 1989 that he had regained the movement of three fingers. Mm-hmm. So when Krishnamurti came back, he went back. I said,
"The other day I got two left."
I said, and he said, "Krishnaji, as you can see, I have the movement only of two fingers. Can you do anything about these two?" Krishnamurti said, "Don't push your luck." Which I think it's marvelous.
Yeah. As a young person, I know he was very much, Krishnamurti that is, very much into experimenting with so many of the things that Besant and Leadbeater talk, occult powers. And the story goes that they were in Monte Carlo, and they have the roulette wheel. And so he and his brother at that time, he spoke, he said, "Look, what we need to do is focus our attention on the ball and see if we can make it so we can gamble and we can win, just as a test." And so they stayed there for a little while. They focused on the number, they spun the wheel, and time after time, they lost their money. So he said, "No, this isn't the way to go with this."
Yes, just a little snippet of history. Around 1917, 1918, Krishnamurti was reported by those close to him in Europe that he was bored with that stuff, the TS and this business of the world teacher and so on. He just wanted to be a normal young man, probably dating. This is not being filmed, is it?
Of course it is.
and then he did date, but I'm not supposed to enter into that. So he was born and he was considering walking out, literally. This is in the letters from Emily Lutens to Mrs. Besant. So he got a letter from Mrs. Besant, very brief. She said to him, "You exist to serve. If you move away from the path of service, you will be nothing." Those near him said that that letter shook him so much that he resumed his work, his talks and travels and so on.
Yeah.
She helped him.
Yeah, to the end of his life.
And she was an elderly lady.
Yeah, he loved her to the end of his life.
Yes.
But I do believe his influence, he was, many people moved away. The society actually, most of the fractures that occurred within the TS occurred really due to, well, Annie Besant. Almost all of them were around Annie Besant, and some of them related to her insistence on the movement that created around Krishnamurti. A lot of people said this is not what this society is supposed to be, and went their separate directions. And then he proclaimed, you can't institutionalize truth. So any sort of institution built around me or anything I want to say, it's going in the opposite direction. You're looking for a belief. I'm trying to give you something related to truth. So in many ways, although he stepped away from a role, it was only by stepping away from that role that he could really become the world teacher that he was, and for the remainder of his life, without an organization that was, technically without an organization that
Yes.
was built around him.
He had pancreatic cancer, which was diagnosed in Europe before he flew to California.
Right.
He rejected the treatment, but he accepted some morphine. There is the case of Sri Ramana Maharshi, who had cancer in his arm. He agreed to have an operation, but without anesthetics. And his devotees just almost went mad. So eventually he agreed to have the anesthetic. And there was a very humble old lady in the ashram in Tiruvannamalai who didn't speak a word of English, only Tamil. She came to him and said, this is a traditional Tamilian gesture, Why is it that you are going to leave us? And Sri Ramana Maharshi looked at her and said, again, the question, He looked at her and said, why do you say I'm going to leave you? Where would I go? So Krishnaji was very ill. 4 days before his passing, he asked for a tape recorder. And his secretary at that time said, Krishnaji, you are on medication. I don't think it's wise to record anything from you in this condition. So someone who was there told me, in the room, told me that Krishnaji gathered all his strength and said to this man, as long as I am alive, I am the teacher. Bring the tape recorder. So you don't mess with that. And then they brought the tape recorder, and he gave the most incredible statement at the end of his life. And Mary Lutyens said that corroborates the Besant and Advaita vision. That he said, for 70 years, this intelligence has occupied this body. Now the body cannot stand it anymore. You will not see this intelligence again in several hundred years. And you don't know what you have missed.
Yeah.
That great emptiness. Yeah. And Dalai Lama, when he gave a talk for his centenary here in Vajanta Vihar, he compared him to a new Nagarjuna.
in that same time, he also said that it was his sense that during his whole time, this lifetime of trying to teach and communicate, nobody got it.
Yes. And then he said, somebody may speculate where will this consciousness go after the death of the body. Nobody knows. Only those who have lived the teachings would know, but nobody has. And there were quite a number of close workers with him, and they had to take that challenge, you know.
Which is not the same as saying that nobody has been influenced and nobody has had transformations as a result of it. But he felt as if nobody really got what he came to bring.
No. Which, to me, reminds me a much older statement, you know. James Robison published that wonderful book, the Nag Hammadi Scriptures, Gospels. And that is the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, you know. The historical church did its best to try and destroy her reputation, unfortunately. And the disciples were upset that she was closer to the Lord than they. And then they went to her and said, we are aware that the Lord loves you more than us. And then she gave them a little speech about the fact that his love could never be personal, because he was the incarnation of this boundless light. That was the first time a woman shut up church people in history.
The first we know about.
That we know about.
Let me ask you this, another topic. You've been in the Theosophical Society since when?
78.
1978. During that time, you have been deeply involved in its workings, which necessarily means that during that time you have seen your share of turmoil as well as bright times. Did you ever have a moment where you felt as if the troubles are not worth the membership?
I can locate that particular trouble. And I have seen over these 40 years and more, the society going from some, both locally, regionally, sometimes internationally, goes through some sort of somersaults. But there was a particular moment where in my own lodge, the level of animosity was really difficult, you know. If they had to make an exhibition of thought forms, the only thought form that would appear would that of hatred. I was a young theosopher. I had joined the TS the year before, and then a president of the TS shows up in my hometown. That was John Coates, whom you have met.
Sure.
Now I have to make a very brief parenthesis here, because we had a meeting with Mary Anderson, Joy Mills, and Ian T. Hoskins called The Lighter Side of Theosophy. And Joy told us this brief story about John. He was touring America when she was the national president. She got a cable. There were no emails in those days. She got a cable. John Coates elected president. She immediately contacted him in a small lodge in the TS in America. She said, you must rush back to Wheaton immediately and plan your trip to India. He said, I'll take the first flight. With much difficulty, he got a flight. But what he didn't know is that on that flight, they were carrying interns of a mental asylum. So he got a seat right in the middle of them.
Yeah.
Now, the supervisors of the interns, that's his legal requirement. He went for a head count before departure. 1, 2, 3, 4. And John Coates, you, who are you? I am the newly elected president of the Theosophical Society. 5, 6, 7. So he shows up in my hometown, and a friend of mine and others took him for dinner. He liked Chinese food. And I asked him this question: is there so much conflict with the TS?
Yeah.
His answer, apparently naive, may have some element of truth in it. He said, because the TS is not a society of sheep. We are all individuals. We think for ourselves. Sometimes there are clashes. She said, some people don't like me. They write me very stern letters about my policies as president. They even didn't like the fact that he had started an international theosophical center. Now, so far as I'm concerned, you receive only accolades by starting a theosophical center, which means your karma is much lighter, you know.
Maybe. Yeah. So at that moment was something where you felt tried.
But before he arrived, I couldn't sleep. I cared for the society. There was enormous division. I was affiliated with the Young Theosophists. Then there were the senior members. The Young Theosophists had a critical look at the senior members. The senior members probably thought that the Young Theosophists were doing anything else but theosophy. I was right in the middle. So I lost sleep. And that was the only time in my life in which I lost weight. So crises are good.
Not for too long, though. Yeah. I mean, it is one of those things where it seems to be cycles of turmoil and cycles of quiet. But throughout the Theosophical Society's history, there have been these moments. I can remember actually Joy Mills when she was president in the United States. And there was a strong young theosophist movement. And there was the idea of having a, young theosophist event at the headquarters. And it was really quite strongly opposed by the people who were living there. Music and, just different things. Much like what we do here, poetry, music. But it was too different. And I remember a lot of the young theosophists were just getting very, very frustrated. And there was one woman there, Marie Louise Gephardt. She wrote a couple of books. But she was one of the older residents. She was from down south. And she came and talked to all the young theosophists. She said, look, don't get so frustrated. Try to take it a little easy. You're concerned about all these old ones stopping you from doing the things. Just remember this. They have to die sometime. And that was supposed to be comforting advice.
Yes. I met Eunice and Felix Layton first in a gathering of young theosophists in Rio de Janeiro, right? Yeah. So I think Felix and Eunice, they gave a lecture, and then they opened for questions. And then I asked them, do you have any advice for us young people in the TS? Felix was silent. Eunice looked at us and she said, question everything. Mm-hmm. In other words, don't allow your mind to become heavy or burdened by concerns and so on. And incidentally, when I was working in the secretary's office, we received the most outlandish letters, One of them said, I have met President Coast in New York. She sent a photograph of her. And I told him I'm the reincarnation of Madame Blavatsky. What am I to do? So later on, she said, Mr. Coates looked at me, 6'4", by the way. He looked at me and he said, you are the fourth person with this claim, and so far I have been unable to make up my mind.
Right. He had 4. I think I have 5 right now, and 2 Maitreya's who write to me.
Yes. And then a young man from Argentina said, do you have the address of the Mahatmas in Tibet? And I said, no, but we have the postcode. Anyhow, but these are lighter moments.
Yeah.
I think the fact is, perhaps few people understand that this crisis happened because it's a shared test. And the test means we need to look at ourselves.
Yeah.
Remember my thought about karma. If you keep on blaming others, you haven't understand a thing about karma.
No, no. And I think those things come, and when those things happen, oftentimes you lose people. Because nobody comes to this Theosophical Society to fight and to go through turmoils with others. But it is something that has been, I mean, even in Krishnamurti's time, it was cleansing in the sense that many people were here for all of the wrong reasons. And then your work becomes diluted. We're supposed to be talking about the world as well. Theosophy, the Theosophical Society, the world. We have a rich history. We have many people who have had a profound influence on the world. Now, what is it? There are all kinds of things people are becoming concerned about the mounting karmic sort of indications from human behavior. What would you say Theosophy has to offer, and how do we do it? Is it in our history? Is it in our books? How does it make an impact?
Yes. I would suggest there is a chapter of a book by N. Sri Ram. The title is not gender-inclusive language, but you will understand his point of view. The title is The Other Man's Point of View. And that means, how do we listen to that? How do you understand that? There is this beautiful story, which I'm sure you have been told again and again. There are two Buddhist monks completely dedicated to Buddhism and the Sangha, one senior and one younger. They reached at the banks of a very wide-flowing river. There was this young woman, rather attractive. That's what the story says, She was there and she was afraid to cross the river and be carried away. So the senior monk lifted her, crossed the current, and dropped her on the other side. And then they continued their walk. Half an hour later, this younger monk, he said, you broke our Vinaya code, the code of discipline. You touched a woman. This action has to be reported. And the Vinaya code is quite strict, but the decision is always by community, not by one individual. So the wisdom of the Buddha is there. And the senior monk said to him, I lifted that young woman before the river. I brought her across and dropped her out, outside the current, but you are still carrying her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I think that the idea that when there is a crisis, either a collective crisis or an individual crisis, I think the capacity to listen is very important. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm trying to learn the meaning of some important Sanskrit word. I asked a Pandit from the library 35 years ago, because the Upanishad said, in order for the self or the Atma to be known, you need to develop Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana. Whenever I had to repeat that in Brazil, I said, Manana is not banana, it's just Manana. And so the first is listening, the other is reflection, and the other is meditation. I think this would be a very low-key recipe for crisis, in the theosophical world. But Who am I to say?
In the 1980s, Dalai Lama came to the Theosophical Society in America, he and his monks, his retinue. And they all stayed there. That was during the time of Dora Kuntz.
At Olcott?
At Olcott, yeah. This is before he got the Nobel Prize.
Yes.
So he was, he didn't have any security guards. None of that was required at that time. But he always had a good feeling toward the Theosophical Society because so many of its members had been helpful when Tibetans came to India. But he came there and he was staying there at the TS. He gave a talk to members, but then he was staying there for several days. And Dora Kuntz, the president, was showing him into the lunchroom. He and the monks were coming for their first meal. And when he came in, the staff was there eating, and the staff was composed of men and women. And the Dalai Lama said, "This won't work." And Dora, being Dora, why? There are women there, and it's part of our, part of our vows. This is not something that can be. We can't eat in the company of women. So Dora, she said, "Well, that's okay, but I'll tell you what. These people live here, so they'll eat here. We can make other arrangements for you if that's what you require, but they're eating here." And the Dalai Lama stopped. He paused for a moment, and he said, "That's okay. We'll eat here." Just like that. He thought, he reflected, and changed something that needed to be changed.
Yes. He also declared that he gives the Kala Chakra initiations, which were secret in the past, in the hoary past, and he suggests that he suggested a book as a preliminary study for this, and it's called the Bodhisattva Way of Life. It's a wonderful book, and Stephen Batchelor called it the Bhagavad Gita of the Mahayana Buddhism, and there is a beautiful statement there. It was quoted by Sri Ram as well. He said that all the misery that exists in the world comes from desiring myself to be happy. All the happiness that exists in the world comes from me desiring others to be happy.
Yeah.
And I think these traditions are based on solid ground. So whenever there is a crisis, that crisis is an exacerbation of the personal element. And somebody has to wake up to that.
Yeah. I think going forward, we really have to, part of what we try to do as members and what we do wherever we are is to try and think about how theosophy can be made known in a way that impacts the world. And it does seem to me that just operating within the boundaries of our organization only places some limitations. I mean, there are people out there in the world who are not members, but who are theosophists in every way that we could imagine. I mean, that was a problem that in the Mahatma letters, they had to point that out, that a particular person was sacrificing his life for the same ideals, so accept him. But I think in order to magnify what it is that we are here to do, it's something that does have to touch others. And I'm continually impressed by the number of people in the world who show up just as soon as a means for them to assist becomes made known. And I do believe that one of the things that in terms of looking toward the world, that it has to be broader than just one organization. The Theosophical Society has influenced people across, being here, I'm continually impressed by the number of people who are drawing on our archives to tell the story of theosophy's influence in countries and with people I never even knew about. All of this revelation to me about what's happening with this art conservation that we're doing. Artists, you know, we knew about the modern artists and Kandinsky and all of them, but artists, you know, here in India, whose way of seeing the world was influenced by this, and who went on to influence others just by the mere viewing of their pictures. I think there's a broad opportunity that's revealing itself that we really do have to move toward.
Yes. I had this idea. It did remain as an idea because I don't have the means to implement it. But I think we need in the TS a comprehensive book, not a very thick book, a comprehensive book, comprehensive in terms of subjects, but specific in size, that would tell the story of the influence of the TS on people from the beginning. The first cremation in America was organized by Colonel Olcott.
Yeah, that's over in the archives
And
now.
the deceased man turned out to be a crook. He didn't pay his bills.
Right.
And then the Madame Blavatsky's psychic abilities. Some people are now studying this at the university level. The Dalai Lama, I think he had an agreement. He inspired the foundation of the Mind and Heart Institute in Colorado, investigating this. He even said when he was there that a Westerner whom he knows, he went around collecting meditative practices, and of course he got a bit confused because he mixed his drink, so to speak. And he came to him and said, I have developed the way of reading minds, and I'm going to read yours. So the Dalai Lama, who lives in an emptiness, he practices emptiness. They say, what you are thinking now is this. And the Dalai Lama said, no, wrong. And then the Dalai Lama said, this is the problem. This is a form of power seeking, you know. But a book which would show how pioneering the TS was on every field, and therefore how relevant it is. We have snippets of this in different books, but we don't have a comprehensive book.
Pedro, I think I know what your next assignment is. And,
I shouldn't have said it.
no, you should have said it, and I'm glad that you accept. Look, we could go on for a long time, but I do think that we probably need to stop. I want to thank Pedro for so much insight into the history of the TS and for sharing it with us so freely. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to Tim and Pedro for this very thought-provoking and very kind and nice dialogue. I'm sure all of us have a lot of food for our thought. And for sure, remember these two wonderful things that both of them say, how we should reach not only within our circle, but out of the Theosophical Society, remembering that Theosophical Society has been a pioneer in many aspects in what we know currently as our current world. So let us, in this spirit of self-transformation, work on all these ideas in order to spread them and make these things happen every time more, having all these wonderful ideas in our hearts and in our minds. Thank you very much. And now we will proceed with the dialogues, I forgot the word there. The group's discussions, thank you. So I invite the coordinators of the groups to come in front and group with the people that are interested. We can just move our chairs as per the organic way that the groups will organize themselves. Thank you very much and see you later.
is that she can bring in